Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
You're listening to the Crazy Alchemist, the Pagan Gods beneath the Vatican. 300,000 people visit St. Peter's Square every day. Most of them photograph the Basilica. Some notice the obelisk. Almost none read the inscription on its base. It says, Christus vincit, Christus regnat, Christus imperat. Christ conquers, Christ reigns, Christ commands. On the other side, Ecce crux Domini, fugite partes adversae. Behold the cross of the Lord, flee hostile powers. These are exorcism prayers. They were carved into the pedestal in 1586 after Pope Sixtus V had the obelisk doused with holy water and crowned with a cross. The stone needed cleansing. It had spent 15 centuries in bad company. Beneath the square, beneath the basilica, beneath the grottos where popes are buried, there is another city. It belongs to the pagan dead. The Sunstone. The obelisk standing at the center of St. Peter's Square today is Egyptian, a column of red granite over 25 meters tall, weighing 326 tons. It was quarried for Heliopolis, the city of the sun, and carved for an unknown pharaoh at an unknown date. It carries no hieroglyphics, and nobody knows why. Either it was made blank or someone erased the inscriptions before it left Egypt. Augustus moved it to Alexandria's Forum Julii after conquering Egypt, where it stood until Emperor Caligula shipped it to Rome. Caligula brought it across the Mediterranean around 40 A.D. He placed it on the spina, the central spine of his private circus on Vatican Hill. The circus sat in the Horti Agrippinae, gardens he inherited from his mother Agrippina the Elder. Claudius finished the construction, and Nero opened the circus to the public. In July 64 A.D., Rome burned. Nero blamed the Christians. Tacitus, writing 50 years later, described what happened next in the Vatican circus. Executions by the hundreds, some dressed in animal skins and torn apart by dogs, others set on fire to serve as human torches lighting the night races. The obelisk stood at the center of the track. It watched. According to the earliest traditions, the Apostle Peter was among those killed here. Clement of Rome, writing around 96 A.D., says, Peter through unjust envy endured many labors, and at last, having delivered his testimony, departed unto the place of glory due to him. Clement does not say where or how. A century later, a Roman presbyter named Gaius was more specific. If you will go to the Vatican, you will find the trophies of those who laid the foundations of this church. The word trophy, tropion, meant a memorial erected at the site of a martyr's death. By 200 A.D., Christians knew exactly where on Vatican Hill Peter had fallen. The circus was abandoned by the mid-2nd century. Some scholars think the memory of what happened there drove people away. The obelisk remained. It stood through the cemetery that grew around it, through Constantine's Basilica, through 12 centuries of pilgrimage, through the demolition of old St. Peter's and the construction of the new one, and it never fell. In 1585, Pope Sixtus V decided to move the obelisk, wanting it centered in front of the new basilica. He convened a council, and nearly 500 engineers submitted proposals. Domenico Fontana won the commission by building a working-scale model in lead. The operation took 13 months of preparation. On the day of the first lift, Sixtus V decreed silence in the square on penalty of death. 800 men and 160 horses worked 45 winches, with trumpet blasts signaling the numbered capstans to pull and a bell on the scaffold signaling everyone to stop. The obelisk rose. On September 10, 1586, the obelisk rose into its new position. 18 days later, the scaffolding came down. The bronze ball that had crowned the obelisk for 15 centuries, believed throughout the Middle Ages to contain the ashes of Julius Caesar, was removed and opened. It was empty. Sixtus V gave it to the city, and it sits in the Capitoline museums today. The Pope replaced the ball with a gilt crucifix, said to contain a fragment of the true cross. He performed the rite of exorcism over the stone and had the prayers carved into the base. An Egyptian sun monument, older than Rome itself, now bore the words, "Christ conquers." The circus and the martyrs. The circus of Caligula covered an area of roughly 350 by 90 meters. Its southern perimeter was confirmed by excavations in the 1940s and 1950s when archaeologists found curved walls beneath the Vatican grounds. The Via Cornelia ran along its northern edge, lined with tombs. This was where Peter died. That much is as close to certain as ancient history allows. Clement of Rome wrote within living memory of the event. Gaius placed the memorial at the Vatican within 130 years. The apocryphal Acts of Peter, composed in the late 2nd century, added the detail that Peter was crucified upside down, requesting the inversion because he considered himself unworthy of dying in the same manner as Christ. The story is famous, the source is weaker than the others. After the persecutions, the circus fell out of use. By 150 AD, the area had become a cemetery. Families built mausolea along the Via Cornelia and across the abandoned grounds. The dead moved in where the racers had competed and the martyrs had burned. By the time Constantine arrived in the early 4th century, Vatican Hill was a city of tombs. 12 meters down. In 1939, workers preparing a tomb for Pope Pius XI in the Vatican grottos broke through a wall. Behind it, a brick structure descended deep into the earth. They had found a Roman mausoleum. Pope Pius XII authorized a full archaeological excavation. While the Second World War consumed Europe, a team of archaeologists dug beneath St. Peter's in near-total secrecy. The work continued from 1940 to 1949. What they uncovered was an entire Roman cemetery, 22 mausolea arranged along a funerary road, containing more than 1,000 burials at depths between 5 and 12 meters below the basilica floor. This was an open-air cemetery. These were above-ground tombs with doors, windows, frescoed walls, and mosaic floors. Wealthy Roman families had buried their dead here from the 1st century through the early 4th century. The dead are pagan. Tomb Z, the Egyptians. The tomb they call the Tomb of the Egyptians takes its name from a painting of Horus, the Egyptian god of the dead, on the center of its north wall. 6 sarcophagi fill the space. The most elaborate sarcophagus shows a Dionysian bacchanal, Dionysus in a chariot driven by a centaur, surrounded by fauns, bacchants, and corybants, while Ariadne sleeps in the depths of a forest. Horus at the door, Dionysus on the coffin, Roman dead in an Egyptian-guarded, Greek-decorated tomb, 12 meters below the Pope's altar. Tomb I, the chariot. A black-and-white mosaic covers the floor. Pluto abducting Persephone, god of the underworld, seizing the daughter of the harvest goddess, driving his chariot while Mercury leads the way. The Romans chose this story for a tomb, a young woman dragged into the land of the dead. It was a comfort image. Even the gods go underground, even they come back. Mausoleum of the Valeri. This 2nd century tomb survived Constantine's construction almost intact. When his engineers packed the surrounding mausolea with rubble, the Valeri tomb was sealed with its frescoes and stucco work preserved. The Valeri family paid for fake marble made of plaster, and it lasted 1,800 years because an emperor buried it in earth. Mausoleum M, the sun god or the son of God. This is the tomb that matters most. Built for a man named Julius Tarpanius and his family, Mausoleum M contains a vault mosaic that has generated more scholarly argument than any other image in the necropolis. It shows a male figure wearing a radial crown, riding a 4-horse chariot. He holds a blue globe in his left hand. Rays extend in all directions against a gold background. The figure looks like Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, the solar deity that Roman emperors promoted from the 3rd century onward. But the other images in the tomb tell a different story. The north wall shows a fisherman. The west wall shows a shepherd carrying a lamb on his shoulders. The east wall shows a sea creature swallowing a human figure. A fisherman, the good shepherd, Jonah and the whale. These are Christian images. Most scholars read the mosaic as Christ depicted in the visual language of Sol Invictus, Christus Sol, the sun god's chariot carrying the Son of God. It is one of the earliest known monumental depictions of Christ, dated to around the mid-3rd century. Both readings are defensible. The mosaic sits at exactly the historical moment when the boundary between the sun god and the Son of God had not yet been drawn. Constantine himself kept Sol Invictus on his coins until 323 AD, more than a decade after his conversion. He was baptized only on his deathbed in 337. The Julii tomb mosaic is a physical artifact of a time when a Roman family could put Christ's stories on their walls and the sun god's crown on his head and see no contradiction. Peter is here, or Peter is not here. The excavators were not digging for pagan art, they were looking for Peter. In 200 AD, the presbyter Gaius had told his opponent to go to the Vatican and see the trophy of the apostle. In the 1940s, the archaeologists found it. Beneath the high altar of St. Peter's Basilica, directly below the spot where popes have celebrated Mass for 17 centuries, they uncovered a small funerary shrine, 2 niches, one above the other, set against a red stuccoed wall. The Red Wall. The structure dates to approximately 150 to 167 AD. This is the trophy of Gaius, a 2nd century memorial marking the spot where the earliest Christians believed Peter was buried. It was built roughly 80 to 100 years after Peter's death. Against the trophy, someone built a perpendicular wall around 250 to 260 AD, Wall G, the graffiti wall. It is covered with scratched inscriptions in Latin, charcoal marks and stylus scratches, names, prayers, invocations of Christ and Peter. Pilgrims had been coming to this wall for at least 60 years before Constantine broke ground. In the wall, archaeologists found a small cavity containing skeletal remains placed in a marble container. A forensic analysis in 1963 identified the bones as belonging to one male, aged 60 to 70, of heavy build. The bones were wrapped in purple wool fabric interwoven with gold thread. Margherita Guarducci, an archaeologist and epigraphist, spent years deciphering the graffiti on Wall G. Her most significant reading was an inscription on the red wall, Petros Eni, Peter is here. Pope Paul VI announced in 1968 that the bones of the apostle had been identified. Pope Francis reaffirmed this conclusion in 2013. Antonio Ferrua, the archaeologist who had preceded Guarducci on the excavation, disputed her reading for the rest of his life. The inscription is damaged and the letters incomplete. Petros Endei, Peter is not here, is an equally plausible reading of the surviving marks. Pius XII himself, the pope who authorized the excavation, was cautious. He said it was impossible to prove with certainty that they belonged to the body of the apostle. The evidence is real, the trophy is real, the pilgrim graffiti is real, the bones of a 60 to 70-year-old man wrapped in imperial purple are real. Whether these are Peter's bones depends on 4 damaged letters scratched into a wall and on which archaeologist you trust. Constantine's gamble. Here is the question that matters. Why did Constantine build here? He already had a church in Rome. The Lateran Basilica, his first Christian building, was constructed around 312 to 318 AD on flat imperial-owned land where he simply demolished military barracks. 0 earth-moving, 0 legal complications. Instead, he went to Vatican Hill. His engineers cut into the northern slope and built up the southern side with fill, constructing 6 great retaining walls and moving more than 40,000 cubic meters of earth. The cemetery was still active. A coin in one cremation urn dates to 318 AD. Families were still burying their dead when the construction crews arrived. Roman law classified burial sites as loca religiosa, sacred and inviolable. Constantine overrode this with imperial authority, but he used a compromise. The dead stayed where they were. His engineers removed the roofs of the mausolea, left the walls standing, and packed the interiors with rubble and earth, creating a honeycomb foundation. He centered the entire basilica on the trophy of Gaius, one small 2nd-century shrine, a simple pair of niches in a red wall, dictated the position of the largest church in the Christian world. Something at that exact spot, whether Peter's actual remains or an unbroken chain of belief stretching back to within a generation of the apostle, was powerful enough to make an emperor move a mountain. Constantine spent more money, violated more laws, and solved more engineering problems to build on Vatican Hill than on any other construction project of his reign. The Great Mother's blood. While Constantine's basilica rose on one side of Vatican Hill, the Great Mother's priests were still working on the other. The cult of Cybele, the Magna Mater, arrived in Rome in 204 BC during the Second Punic War. Hannibal was in Italy. The Senate was desperate. They consulted the Sibylline books and received an answer: bring the Great Mother from Phrygia, and Rome will be saved. A delegation traveled to Pessinus in central Anatolia and returned with Cybele's most sacred object, a large black meteorite. The stone arrived at Ostia in April 204 BC. Rome defeated Hannibal. The cult became permanent. A second sanctuary, the Phrygium, was built on Vatican Hill near the Circus of Caligula. The archaeological evidence is inscriptional. In 1609, during construction of the new St. Peter's facade, workers uncovered 24 fragmentary marble altars beneath the foundation. They date from 305 to 390 AD. Most were dedicated by high-status Romans, senators, and aristocrats, commemorating a specific ritual, the taurobolium. The taurobolium worked like this. A priest descended into a pit while a bull was led onto a wooden platform above him. The bull's throat was cut. Blood poured down through the slats onto the priest below, drenching him entirely. He emerged, reborn. One inscription contains the phrase, in aeternum renatus, reborn forever. The parallel with Christian baptism was obvious and was noticed at the time. Both rituals promised new life. One used water, the other used blood. Both were performed on Vatican Hill. Through the 4th century, 2 religious communities operated on Vatican Hill side by side. The Phrygianum hosted the bull sacrifices and the drums and pipes of the Great Mother. St. Peter's Basilica, with its altar centered above a fisherman's bones, hosted the Eucharist. Both claimed to offer passage through death. Both occupied the same hill. The last recorded taurobolium in history took place on May 23, 390 AD. By then, the taurobolium had become what one scholar called a hallmark of the pagan nobility in their final struggle against Christianity. In February 391, Theodosius banned all animal sacrifices. In November 392, a second decree classified offerings to pagan gods as high treason. The Phrygianum fell silent. The altars were buried. 11 centuries later, in 1609, workers digging the foundations for the new St. Peter's facade pulled them out of the ground. The Hill of Prophecy. Why is it called Vatican? Aelius Gellius, a Roman writer of the 2nd century AD, gave two answers. The first, the name comes from vaticenia, prophecies, because a god who inspired divination presided over the field. The second, attributed to Varro, Rome's greatest antiquarian, a minor deity called Vaticanus held dominion over the beginnings of the human voice. When a newborn draws its first breath and cries, that cry, vagitus, belongs to Vaticanus. The first syllable of Vaticano is the sound a baby makes. Augustine knew this. In The City of God, he mocked Vaticanus 3 times while ridiculing the Roman habit of assigning a god to every minor function. The honest answer? We do not know why it is called Vatican. Gellius gave us 2 guesses. Varro gave us a god of crying babies. The Etruscans left no explanation. A hill of prophecy. A hill of the first cry, a hill of the dead. What lies beneath? You can visit the Necropolis today. The Vatican Excavations Office runs tours for small groups. You descend beneath the Basilica, past the grottos where modern popes are buried, into the 2nd century cemetery. You walk past Horus, past Dionysus riding a centaur-drawn chariot, past Persephone being dragged to the underworld, past the Valeri family's stucco portraits preserved in perfect detail because an emperor sealed them in rubble. Then you arrive at the Red Wall, a simple stuccoed surface painted red with a small shrine and a scratched, damaged wall beside it. Pilgrims carved their prayers here for 60 years before Constantine covered it in marble. Garducci read 4 letters and announced that the apostle was here. Ferrua read the same letters and said he was not. The bones of a heavy man, aged 60 to 70, wrapped in purple and gold, rest nearby. Above you, 40 meters of marble, travertine, and gold. Michelangelo's dome, Bernini's baldachin, 500 years of Renaissance and Baroque engineering, the largest church in the world, built because one emperor believed what 4 scratched letters on a red wall told him. The obelisk stands outside, blank-faced, bearing no pharaoh's name and an exorcism prayer. It has been here longer than any of them, Egyptian, Roman, Christian. A sunstone at the center of Christendom. The bronze ball on top was supposed to hold Caesar's ashes. It held nothing. The cross that replaced it was supposed to hold a piece of the true cross. A later inspection found nothing inside. The hill keeps its secrets. It always has.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.